MacBook Pro 16-inch. Thank you very much, DJ.
All right, sounds good. Sky Gleason, followed by Mark Horner.
Sky Gleason coming in from Seattle, the spleen of America. No, we're talking into the, what is it, MV7, about, what is that? That far away, a fist worth, talking directly into the microphone, looking for the needles, needle meters, needles, looking at 31 and a finger down, dialing it down to 28, and I'm seeing an okay, so me and my spleen will leave.
Thank you. Mark Horner, followed by Jason, and we'll do Bill last.
Sky's fellow Spleentonian, Mark Horner in Seattle, Washington. Careful, Sky. Careful. Speaking into a Shure SM7B, going into a DBX 286S, going into a Scarlett 2i2, and into a little old laptop. Test 1, 2.
I think we're good there. Just watch that you don't get too excited there, Mark,
Okay.
and you get a little loud when you get a bit excited there. We'll
Thank
come
you.
to Jason, and then followed by Bill Davis.
All right, so my audio chain is a Heil PR40 into an Aphex channel into a Teranex embedder, and it looks like I finally got it nailed.
Very good. Thank you, sir. What was the change?
The change was not a limiter, but instead a compressor. There was too much compression on the channel, and that's why your ears didn't get blown out. But yeah, that just goes to show that all limiters are, or all compressors are somewhat limiting.
Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see a link down below. You can click on it and you'll end up in Zoom. Once you click on that link, you'll end up in Makana, and that's where you can become a producer for the show. This is where the whole show is run by you, the viewer. You're the producers. You're deciding what we're going to talk about by asking questions and voting on those questions. So make sure to find your way into Makana and ask those questions. If you think you can answer some of those questions, you just need to be here a little earlier, 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's when we do the mic checks. If you're not sure that you're ready for that, you can come as early as 6, hang out with us and test your system and make sure that it's ready to go, or just see what it's like to be hanging out with the panel. We'd love to have you. Everybody, a lot of people get intimidated. We talk to people about that. They're like, the panel is so smart. Well, it's because there's like 500 years of experience in this panel, but not in any one person. So a lot of people, what we find is people jump on and they have that one little area that they know really well. And it's not about what any one of us knows. It's about what all of us know. So we would love to have you add to that when you're ready. So come join us on the panel and answer the questions that you can. Now, the first hour is general question and answer, any questions that you have about media or virtual production. And then the second hour is usually something that we want to spend a little bit more time on. And this week we've been rebuilding our rebuilding our system. And so you're going to get to watch us continue to down that experiment. Later today, we have we're going to do another WWDC wrap up. We got a couple developers coming in. Andy Anatko is going to be joining us. He's going to take Renee's spot. So it should be a lot of fun. Same links as we used before. So I don't think we put it properly into the email, but if you look at the email out there, we'll send another one out to correct it. But it's the same links that we had in the past where you can, the same link that we worked on Monday will work tonight as well. And so we open the doors at 4:30. You can all come in and start hanging out. Then everyone will kind of come through. We're going to invite a handful of you. If there's someone watching here, if you're into coding or if you're feeling fairly technical and you've been watching WWDC relatively closely, I'm looking at you, Jason. We'd love to have you actually send me a ping on Discord. We're going to bring some more folks into a wider panel. So we'll have a handful of developers, but some of the folks from our group will also be bringing in to give their 2 cents. So if you feel like you have things you'd like to say about the WWDC, and it can be from the user side as well. But if you have some technical stuff that you'd like to be part of, ping me in Discord today. And we'll add you to that panel. So we'll all start in the same one, and then we'll pull everybody into a panel. We're going to use the format that we've been testing in the last 2 days over that process. And so we're going to be a little more aggressive tonight. So anyway, you're welcome to do that. And I think we're ready to jump into the questions. Go ahead, Bill.
Great. Let's see if everything's working smoothly. Good morning, everybody here in California, and good day to everybody all around the world. Tony Mobley has our first question. Is Professor Jeff Francis going to update his Improve Your Zoom Experience video? And there's a link to it.
Can I interrupt real quick? Alex, may I have the con?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't know. We don't know if he's going to improve it or not. I think that it's a lot of times you think you're going to do another video about something and then you just never get around to it because there's so many other things and it's already there. So we'll see. Jeff's not here right now, so we'll have to have him answer it in the future. Next question.
Moving on to Eric Price of Leavenworth, Kansas. He says that there is much talk here about screen scraping. Could you talk about what this is, why, and how you do it?
Yeah. So the reason we screen scrape is because we need something from our computer and we want to push that into our switcher. So it's just a way we kind of term that process. It's not very complicated. It's just an HDMI out of your video saying, you're basically pushing that out and converting it, either putting it directly into your switcher or converting it to SDI. And then you get the screen. So it's everything on the screen. It's not a dedicated output that you would normally have. And so it's a great way for us to grab that. For instance, what you're seeing on the stream right now is us screen scraping this screen and then passing that into YouTube. So the viewer is able to see it. Next question.
Moving on, we're going to Tony Mobley, our friend from Newman, Georgia, who says Filmic Pro has released an update this morning. How does the advanced scopes for the M1 iPads and center stage support help with virtual production workflows?
I haven't seen it. Has anyone seen the new Filmic update? I haven't had the opportunity to play with it yet. So I think that we'll probably talk about it. Unfortunately, Tim from Filmic Pro is on another show tonight, so he won't be able to tell us more about it himself. But he was on our Monday show. But we'll have to dig into that a little bit. And since a lot of us are using Filmic Pro, it should be a lot of fun to look at. Next question.
This panel is very smart, but 2 minutes after they release something, we don't know.
Yeah, exactly. We're not that fast. Yeah, exactly.
Moving on to Rachel Ann Clifton, who says, I'll be the brave one. What in the world is NDI and why is it mentioned often and affectionately? Thank you. Hi, Rachel.
Anyone want to dig into explaining NDI? Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
NDI is an MPEG-4 transport stream. It's a long GOP way of moving stuff around the internet or around your network instead of having an SDI connection or a HDMI connection. NDI good, NDI HX bad.
Yeah, so I mean, in a lot of ways, it just, for a lot of us, we're moving, if you want to move video around and you don't want to have all the copper that's required to do it, putting it over the network is a convenient way to do it. With that, you end up with, a lot of the idiosyncrasies of moving things over your network. So you can often end up with little glitches that a lot of us notice there. But a well-defined network usually works pretty well. Next question.
Tim Holm in San Lorenzo is up next with, is there some sort of shower curtain type bar that can span a couple of walls that are around 7 foot apart? I'd like to hang an overhead huddle cam and possibly hairlight on it. Nothing super heavy.
Yeah, go ahead, Carl, and then John.
Yeah, so Manfrotto makes this quite amazing little arm. So it's extendable. It's like telescoping. As you can see, well, just give me a second. As you can see, that the weight is only about 30 ounces. And because of that, it allows you to actually put it on like normal hooks that you'd find in like Home Depot. You don't have to get like really heavy hooks. So it's pretty cool how that works. It extends, as you see, it sends out to 9 feet, but it goes from 3 feet. So it's very versatile as well.
Go ahead, John.
Darn you, Carl, you took my answer. I have the auto graphics. The auto poles are fantastic. I have them set up over here on my other studio setup, and they're really fantastic. If you're mounting them vertically like I did, make sure that you get the levels built in because they're pretty hard to get up straight and down.
Go ahead, Jason.
On the professional level, I would say speed rails would be the normal choice. But, you know, the other part of it is there's nothing preventing you from just going to Home Depot and using normal pipe. That'll work.
Go ahead, Sky.
The auto poles also do have an extender so that if you need it longer, you can get it even further across the span.
Go ahead,
and I
Mark.
do use mine horizontally.
Yeah, Mark?
Yeah, so I did this very thing in the past 6 weeks or so. I just went to Amazon. I bought a shower curtain bar, and it extends across so that when I want to have a color background, I just hang something there with some clips. In addition to that, I didn't want stands because I have a limited space, and so that takes up real estate along the floor. So I got 2 more of them, and I have one vertically on the right, one vertically on the left. So I can clip the backdrop to those sides too. I'll grab the link and share that in Mokana.
Okay, Bill, Jeffrey, and Beju, real quick.
I was just going to say, don't confuse auto poles and the Manfrotto regular poles are 2 different things. So make sure you're getting the right thing. The auto poles have a handle that locks them and pushes them out a little bit. 2 different.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So shower curtains go to a certain length. You need something longer. Do regular curtain bars. And then you can get what are called wall mount ceiling mount pipes, which I'll put the link in Mokana, so you can get. And then you just attach it to your ceiling. That way, it's a little bit sturdier.
Beju.
If you're going for the DIY route, check out MakerPipe. I'll drop the link in the Mokana, basically to allow you to use standard house piping, but in a more flexible way.
Next question.
Moving on to Robert Klein in Waddell, Arizona. First hour, would you recommend a Mac Mini or a MacBook Pro? And for the rebuild, could you give me a recommended hardware chain so I don't buy out-of-spec hardware and future-proof myself?
I'm just depends on what you're trying to do. You know, I think that I will say that as the iPads get better, I spend less and less time with my laptop in the field. And so I don't know. It just depends on how you're using them and whether you think you're going to be in the field. And maybe it's the post-COVID, you know, we're not spending as much time at a cafe or traveling or other things like that. And I don't expect to travel heavily, maybe ever again. So I'm leaning more towards Mac Minis and iMacs and, going backwards from the portable and using my iPad when I go out. So I think that a Mac Mini has a lot more extensibility. I think that's the big thing is you've got a lot more connections on the back. And probably would say this summer, if you don't need it, I might wait for a little while. There were some rumors about things that were in metadata that we might have been very close to hardware releases at DubDub and didn't quite make the turn. So we might want to wait a little bit before we buy something. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
The one advantage to a Mac Mini over a MacBook Pro is you don't have that computer on your desk. You can move it, or in the area, you can move it away. That way, if those fans start to spin up, you hear less of it.
I will say with the new Mac Minis, you don't hear anything. But I mean, I haven't been able to get them to make any noise yet. But maybe I just haven't been pushing them hard enough. But they are pretty darn quiet. But it is nice to be able to just plug them into an overall system, and you can easily get your 2 monitors out, and you still got a bunch of USB connections, and you've got a lot of other things that make it more palatable. And the iPad, as I said, is for me most of what I need when I leave the house now. Jason.
The other advantage to a Mac Mini is that dollar for dollar, you're looking at about $500 more for the portable version of a relatively similar chipset.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Richard Lavery in Belfast, Ireland asks, would John Ittelson give us a lowdown on his underwater event recently?
How did it go, John?
Well, it's not my event. It's the California State Parks Port Projects, State Parks Resources for Students and Teachers. And the public version of it is available on YouTube. If you celebrate World's Ocean Day, just put in California State Parks. On the technical side, it's an office hour success story. Chris Fenwick introduced us to a sound man that he worked with, Stan, and it's probably the best audio you've ever heard from divers. We had the video lockdown when we did our dive in Tahoe. The public site, which is, we had the interpreters on the shore talking directly to the divers. I'm going to see if we could get the videos from the field trips that were Zoom calls to schools, because the real telling moment was when we finally let the students talk directly to the divers. Very conversational, because we were doing breath suppression. And it's interesting to see a class of 5th graders when the divers points to a starfish and you see all of them going like this, trying to look at it. It was a pretty amazing experience. If there are any specific questions.
And you said it was on California State Parks?
Yeah, California State Parks and Facebook.
In Facebook, but also in YouTube? Is that the
I don't know
Parks?
whether YouTube one's in yet.
Oh, okay. Got it.
But
okay.
Facebook.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. And you're doing another one, right?
This was the first time the divers from the California State Parks collaborated with the divers from the Monterey Bay Aquarium. And we hadn't finished the first day before they said they're going to be doing another one, probably from Monterey Bay. The next one that's formally scheduled is a dive in Lake Tahoe, and that's going to be in September. But there's a chance we'll do one in July. They're talking about it right now.
That's awesome. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, can you elaborate a little bit on breath suppression? Does that have mute the mic whenever the regulator opens, or what is that?
It is very interesting what Stan did, and we should probably have him talk about it. The first part of it was dealing with the different mic elements that you could put into the diver's mask. So they have different audio characteristics for the different voices. We had a female diver and a male diver. The acoustics on that are optimized for speech. So it sounds more telephone-like, and this was the dive comms for safety and communication between divers. So Stan sort of reverse engineered that with a equalization to make it sound a wider frequency range. Then he took that into I think he had a cheaper version where one of your computers by Courtney. So we had 2 of those in there running digital processing on the audio. And so that was doing the equalization. Then we had a trigger. Basically, any loud noise, it cut out. So the divers were told to breathe hard and speak softly. And so the divers were speaking softly, very conversational. As soon as they took a breath, it cut it out. If you listen to it, Angie, who was our California State Parks diver, spoke slower, and there's almost no breath noise with her. Patrick, who's the diver from the Monterey Bay Aquarium, was a very fast talker, so the gate wasn't quite fast enough, but actually it added to it. So she was like clear on, we joked, better than an AT&T phone call, which is a low standard, but hers was perfect. You never heard the breathing. With his, you would hear a little bit of it. And we decided, rather than trimming that, it actually added to the effect, because his voice was a little stronger. And so we were quite pleased technically, but even more pleased with programmatically. The students loved it. The feedback that we got, both from the professionals, divers who were watching it, but also from the general public. It's also on the Monterey Bay Aquarium website. I need to point out this was a collaboration between the Monterey Bay Aquarium and the California State Parks.
It's great. It might be good if we can organize everybody to try to do a second hour on it. Like if we can get all the people that were involved, it'd be fun to
It would be really great because there were a lot of moving parts, two separate, there were 30 people.
Yeah.
Because we had to control entrance to the park. It was a gorgeous day out there. So we had, the public there, and the state parks does not close things when they're doing things like this. So we had the rangers and the state park lifeguards who would normally be around there. Then we had the dive teams, and the dive teams were the two divers in the water, a cable handler, and then and we had two of those. And then we had all the ports team, and we actually had Stan, who was Chris's friend, and Keaton flew all the way from the Midwest to be the buddy with Brad, who was the director who was doing the StreamYard. It was the first StreamYard event that they had done. And the other events were Zoom, and they did one Flipgrid.
That's awesome. Yeah, let's see if we can pull everybody together and do something together.
They would love to do it. Maybe in a week. They're all sort of
no.
getting sleeping now.
It could be a week or two. It just maybe even 2 weeks. We'll just give them a little bit of time, but let's find a time we can bring them on.
Well, and that'd be fun because we all, in addition to doing all this, they put another diver in with the GoPros to document underwater, and we documented some of the stuff topside.
Awesome. That's what.
And our local community access channel did interviews with the divers and the people. So we could do that in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Next question.
Moving on to Robert Barrow in Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania. And Robert says, I'm looking to buy a good quality tripod for my photography for around half an Alex. What are your recommendations?
Go ahead, Carl.
So as a photographer, I own a lot of tripods, but this was actually one of my first tripods I ever bought back in the 90s. They still make it. So it's a Manfrotto 190. This is an upgraded version, so it has better connectors and stuff. So this will get you around half an Alex. The carbon fiber version of this is about $600 US. You can get more lighter weight carbon fiber versions for around half an Alex, but I would always go with aluminium unless you're really weight conscious. And this fits right into where you're going. It comes with the Pro plate as well, this particular one.
Anyone else? Let's see here. Go ahead, Jesse. Go ahead, Beju.
I'll say also look at the 55 legs as well rather than the 190s. They can go a little bit taller. So if you're a tall person, you might find the 190 a little bit low. You might have to crouch down a little bit to get it at eye level. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, they're very similar.
Yeah, Stuart.
Yeah, hit the right mouse button and the things work. For budgets less than what Carl's just recommended, which is a great tripod, by the way, I can recommend the E-Image tripod, nope, that's an old Manfrotto behind me. I normally have the Scion sitting on an E-Image. And Benro makes some very good budget tripods as well. If you want something really light, like if you're doing nature photography, Miller makes some really nice carbon fiber ones, but they are more expensive than the Manfrottos.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill, and then Jesse.
I just wanted to know real quick, if you're thinking about carbon fiber versus aluminum does tend to be a little more versatile because you can clamp things to the legs. Carbon fiber, if you clamp down too hard, you crush them. So that's just something to think about.
Go ahead, Jesse.
So if you want something that could also do video that has a fluid head, this is what I have. It's $170 by a company called Geekota, and it's very light and not that expensive.
I think the one that I've traveled with around the world is the Mi Photo, and I think it's the Classic is what they call it now instead of the S Collection or whatever. The main thing for me is that it's light in it. They have some that are very bling now, which is not exciting, but they still have black ones. I have it just out of reach. I can't quite go grab it for you, but what I like about it is it's got a ball head. This is for photography, but I do use it for reference video if I'm not trying to operate it. And what I like about it is it'll fit in my carry-on, which is important. So I have a lot of 190s as well. The Manfrotto 190s are what we used a long time. The Mi Photo one is a lot stiffer. So it's a little bit more hefty than the 190, and I've used it literally on every continent, and it's easy to go in the backpack. It pulls the center pull, comes out, or you can unscrew the top part so that it'll fit into your carry-on, which is again for me an important thing. Next question.
Moving on to Tim Holm in San Lorenzo, and Tim says, our church uses around 20 AA batteries per service. We like and use Duracell ProCell Alkaline, and they are extremely reliable, but that's nearly 800 batteries a year. How can I reliably minimize this expense with rechargeables?
Go ahead, Courtney, and then Carl.
Yeah, I find the Inaloop batteries work pretty well and get the higher amp hour rating, and a lot of times they'll actually last longer than the alkalines, and of course they're all rechargeable, although they take a while to recharge, and if you find you have to change them in the middle of a service or something, that would be problematic, but they should make it through normal church services without a problem.
Good, Carl.
Yeah, so as Courtney said, the Inaloops, they're spot on there. So this technology Panasonic bought from Sanyo, and they've actually improved it. So these are 2,500 milliamp hours. The chargers are the more interesting part. You do want to use their charger over generic chargers because it will overcharge battery and shorten their life.
Good, Stuart.
Tim, double check your user manual and make sure that the voltage and amperage output of your battery isn't critical. Some manufacturers do specify that you must use an alkaline battery for some devices. They get very critical if you go outside the voltage range, and many rechargeables are able to drop below the discharge rate of an alkaline. So just be careful with that. But otherwise, yeah, Inaloop.
Good, Sky.
Mickey, if he were here, would say that he found the ones from IKEA are the same but rebranded, and consequently you get the quality, but at a much less cost.
Good, Tommy.
And as the same as Sky said, we'll go with the Amazon. They're also very, very well. They've worked very well for me.
Next question.
James Babbitt in San Diego here says, how do Dolby Atmos and Apple immersive sound differ?
Well, yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Oh boy, is this a loaded question. Okay, well, all Atmos is immersive, but not all immersive is Atmos, if that makes any sense. Atmos is a very specific thing, and Apple's kind of immersive sound is also its own very specific thing. So the two are a Venn diagram. They can overlap, but they don't just yet.
And you have some kind of clicking going on. It might be a sampling issue, Jason. Go ahead, Carl.
So yeah, so Apple's marketing team have used spatial audio 2 times to describe 2 different technologies. One, they're using it as a generic term for Atmos for their music platform. The other, they announced a little while ago for part of their AirPods Pro and the AirPod Max, which you switch on. It's a feature you can switch on, which actually measures the rotation of your head. Those two are not, they don't work together. So the rotation of your head will not work with the music. It only works with film content. There's a tag in videos that allows it to work. It's not tagged in the music content. So even though they have the same name, they're actually 2 separate technologies. Apple's
also extending, in some cases, stereo into something that is more general. So so Apple will take your stereo and try to put it into spatial as well, and that's not Atmos. So there's Apple's doing a lot of things to make to really extend the listenability of a lot of things, or extend the dimensionality, but not all of it is pure Atmos. But they're using obviously Atmos very heavily for kind of the core of what they're doing. Next question.
Simon Ray in Shrewsbury, UK is up next with a friend who has a regular Twitter live stream from their mobile. Recently, it's been out of sync. The video is ahead of the audio by half or 1 second. Any suggestions other than removing any wireless elements?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so if video is usually ahead of audio, simplify your audio chain. Usually audio processing shouldn't take as long as video. So that's the first thing I'll notice. If I'm out of sync and my video's ahead, it means I've got a complex audio chain. So simplify your audio chain.
Yeah, it's probably the wireless there. It's very unusual for that to happen. Like that's very, it's not a usual thing. So there's something very wrong with the audio chain if it gets behind the video. Usually we have it the other way, and we have lots of delay tools for it. The problem is delaying video is very difficult because you need a much larger buffer than what you need for audio. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
If you're using hardware or software to get to the Twitter live stream and you have another computer, put the computer in between, run it into the computer, and then check to see if there's audio sync from there. And then, of course, go out to Twitter from there and see if that makes a difference, if you can do that.
Next question.
Tommy Shantz here in the panel from St. Paul, Minnesota says, what is the easy way to bring a Zoom into a hybrid event?
The main challenge is audio. so that, if you're bringing a Zoom, I'm assuming when you say bring it into a hybrid event, you want to push it into the actual screen that's on the main stage. Is that right, Tommy? Is that you're trying to put that?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you want to have someone participate, in the event. So the main thing you're gonna the getting it onto the screen obviously is relatively straightforward. It's the audio that becomes an issue. So you need to make sure that you're the easiest way. When you say easiest, is you give the speakers anyone that's going to interact with them an SM58 and have them and train them to hold it close to their mouth, because the off-axis rejection will knock out most of the speaker returns, or all of it. And with the echo cancellation that you already have, it'll work. So that's the easiest way to do it. The more refined way to do that is to have a mixer like an X32 or a QL1 that's going to do a Dugan auto mix. And so what you're doing is you're using the different channels to push the other channel down. So when someone's speaking, it's automatically pushing the speakers down. But it's a dance, and usually we usually hand that to someone like Brian Maddox, to do that for us and have him set that up, because if you don't get it right, it's a horrible experience. I mean, and a lot of people have died on those rocks, so you just want to, that's one that's gotten a lot of people is that return, but the audio is going to be the challenge. The other thing you want to think about is for the person on the other side, this is one of the few places where, you actually want the camera to be just about shoulder level for them. And then you want to put the screen underneath the camera, not above the camera. And you don't want a teleprompter, actually. This is one of the few places you don't. When you do a teleprompter with someone and you put them into another room, they'll look like they're looking across. They're looking straight out from the screen, but it looks like they're looking across the audience. When you put the camera just a little bit below, just right below the lens, they will look down at the audience through that camera. So the down look that we normally try to avoid is actually something that looks almost eerie and a little overwhelming. It looks like Wizard of Oz kind of thing, where they're looking right at you if you're sitting in the audience. And so that under look is actually a good, is actually the few times that you want to do, one of the few times that you actually want that. We found that out by accident. Our teleprompter broke. We put the monitor underneath the camera, and someone on the other side said, "What did you just do?" So they were like, "This is incredible." So anyway, so that's the way to do that. So you have the person on the other side there. And then, the main thing to do is they have notes, is you want to put everything on that monitor. So we put a switcher into that monitor so that we can put their notes, any kind of response, anything we're going to give them, we key it over top of the video. What you don't want is also people going like this, around while they're in front of a lot of people, because it's really obvious on a really big screen. So you want all of their gaze to sit inside of that one monitor that sits right below the lens on their camera. So that's the video part is relatively simple. That framing stuff makes a big difference. The camera that you return to them should be right from their screen. That's the most natural for them. What we do is put a PTZ underneath it. So there's a PTZ right underneath the screen that they're speaking from. And it just gives the speaker the real feel of being up on stage, because they're going to see everyone from the same point of view as the screen. So those things will help tie people in. I know that's not the simplest way to do it, but those are some of the finer elements. We've done a lot of these, so it's and so those are some of the things that we found have kind of, as we did it over and over and over again, we found those things made a big difference. Next question.
Comes from Paul Valus, Austin, Texas, a long-time participant here in the panel. And he says, on an LG 43-inch quad like Guy and I use, how do you stack windows from a Mac Mini M1? It's an obscure setting and I can't recall it, and I don't think it's in the display settings. Anybody use that?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I think what you're talking about is app expose. There's no easy way to line up the bars of windows. So if you hold down Control or Option when you have that window selected, it will trigger app expose, and that will allow you to choose which one you want.
And you're still clicking. So next question.
John Preto in Las Vegas here on the panel as well. Alex, we all know that Leo Laporte uses the Tricaster TC2 Elite. Can you tell us about his audio chain? Thanks.
I believe that I don't think he's using the Tricaster for the audio at all. He has the Telos system that is running all the audio there. So I don't think that he made some of the playback out of it, maybe pushing out audio from there. But if I remember correctly, it's I think it's is it the Aurora, or there's I'm not as familiar with it, but he's got another audio desk there that manages all of that over IP, and then that's embedded. The last time I looked, it was embedded into that. So unless he's changed it, the only audio coming out of the TriCaster is the playouts that might be played out from there. But I believe that the rest of it's all being mixed into a Tello system. Next question.
Comes from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas says, with so many audio vendors, Wave is prominent, not announcing a timeline for full Apple Silicon support, not to mention no 32 gigabyte RAM on the Apple Silicon Macs, would you still buy an Apple Silicon Mac if you were in the market for a new Mac for audio?
Yeah, Carl is nodding. You got to raise your hand if you're going to nod, Carl.
Well, Logic. So Logic is the key there, and Logic's about to get updated. So Logic can be the centerpiece. Everything else will slide in later on.
The the software, the folks that are doing a lot of these auto ignore the M1 at their risk, at their own peril. That's the problem is that Logic will, people will the users will start moving, and so a lot of people have been really embedded in their apps. But if they keep a lot of the audio manufacturers, because of a lot of legacy drivers and so on and so forth, haven't moved forward. And I know that some folks that I know that are heavy in Pro Tools are, learning Logic, because they're just, they haven't switched over yet, but they're like trying to do the same things because they're trying to get out of the Pro Tools thing because Pro Tools can't keep up. Go ahead, Bill.
My experience in the last maybe 5 years has been efficiency is almost more important than the amount of RAM and grunt in some of this new coding. Specifically, I know that people said don't buy just 16 gigabytes of RAM for the machine you're doing video on. Well, I needed to use a laptop, and so I got a Mac laptop, and it's been working fine even for 4K and things like that. And I just think that when coders code really efficiently, you don't need as much horsepower. So that old rule of if you don't have tons of RAM and tons of horsepower, it's not going to work, I think is a little bit fading away. I think efficiency of coding is as important these days. My 2 cents.
Next question.
Moving on to Bo Cardle of Charleston, South Carolina. And Bo says, looking for a simple HDR scope solution. Is a UTAP into a Mac Mini running Scopebox or OmniScope good enough for learning purposes?
I'd say absolutely. Go ahead, Carl.
I've been devouring a lot of tutorial videos on DaVinci Resolve HDR scopes and how to read them and how to apply them, 1,000 nits, 4,000 nits. I'm learning a lot, but DaVinci Resolve is a really good place to start because there's a lot of good tutorials, a lot of good educators out there who will take you step by step on understanding the difference between SDR and HDR and how HDR is applied in DaVinci Resolve. So that'd be where I'd start for learning.
Go ahead, Charles.
I actually second everything that Carl just said. And just remember, the scopes in SDR tend to be a bit more linear, where in HDR they're logarithmic in a base 10. So technically, if you're switching back and forth, your 1000 nits in HDR will sit around in the scopes around 768. So that's a good reference if you're looking in Resolve to just know if you're switching back and forth, okay, that's where I need to bring things back to. But I think Scopebox and OmniScopes, it's more than enough to learn. But in Resolve, you can learn everything that you need to do.
Next question.
We're jumping around a little. Douglas Carmichael looks like he's up next. With many venues are currently trying to figure out how to handle large-scale indoor events once restrictions regarding crowd size are lifted. Should current events cause us to think in new ways about what we produce and not simply make a huge physical turnout the gold standard for measuring success?
As I've said before, I think that physical events are probably going to become more niche than they have been in the past. It's just the ROI for folks as the digital versions of these things start to pick up speed. What we're seeing is just it's not it's not the same. It's just that the amount of investment to the return is much higher on the digital events than the physical events. And so there's a lot of people who are desperate to go back to that because that's what they know. But that's usually, eventually the money wins. So go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, it's interesting on the inverse is true as well because of smaller venues. Smaller venues have always had a capacity issue, and streaming is a great solution to that. But there, we're also kind of my venue. We're suffering from social distancing, so our small audience size of 200, 300 is now 30, and that's not going to go away anytime soon for the rest of the year. So there's a huge opportunity here for us to reach audiences way beyond what we could have actually physically had.
I think you're absolutely right that the big winners are the small venues that want to have something that's more intimate that can extend out past that. The larger ones, the thing that's going to come up next, again, we've talked to some folks about it, is carbon impact is going to become a thing. Over later this year and early into next year, there are environmental groups that are basically planning to require or push for every conference to publish their carbon impact and buy carbon credits, at least, if not just publish it. And that's going to have a negative impact on really large events. Not so much small events, but large events are going to start having to deal with the repercussions of that publicly. And they're doing it because we all stopped and kind of figured out another way to do it, and they want us to keep moving that direction. Go ahead, Courtney.
I think it depends a great deal on the event. I think events where you're premiering, a work of art or a work, a film or a gadget or whatever, a product, that benefits mostly from hybrid. But charitable events, I'm seeing a lot of charitable events coming back now. We just took a whole bunch of bookings yesterday for the rest of the year for charitable events because they depend on being the event itself is the thing to attend. People want to show up in their new dress or and show off. And as far as the charities go, they can guilt people a lot easier if they're in the room to get money out of them, and they can hold silent auctions. And I think they're going to be a charitable event, things like that. Banquets are going to come back with a vengeance, I believe.
I think the interesting thing there is that we've worked on a couple of them, and the returns so far on most of the charitable events that we've worked on have been somewhere between 3 and 5 times as much revenue from the digital version because they were able to incorporate people from all over the world. People didn't have to be in LA or New York. Those are the 2 primary places, or Chicago, that did those events. And so suddenly they had a much larger net. So while they're making less per person, they were having a much larger number of people. And that's what we're going to continue to see with these events, is that by physical events have been basically knocking out 99% of the world for the last, forever. And, more 99% is conservative. It's probably 99.99999% of the world is cut out by that. When we start doing them digitally in digital first events, we start including a lot more people. And it doesn't require each one to spend as much money to make that digital event more successful. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you. I've only been to one event post-pandemic. It was the Internet Marketing Party in Austin, Texas, and they had a Zoom meeting. They had about 60 people, and then they had their first real life event down on West 6th Street, and they had about 200 people, and they paid $39 each to go to the event. And then they followed that up with a Zoom meeting, and in the Zoom meeting, they had 12 people following that. And it's probably an anomaly. It's just that's just one event. It's a very small sample.
The physical events don't really work when you're talking about all local, like you're really trying to do a local thing. When you start talking about a larger impact, more of a global market, that's when things start to become much more interesting. Go ahead, John.
The 3 charitable events I was connected with all made more money than their physical events this year. Yeah. And the group that I'm working with, Mike Slade, they want to do hybrid, and one of the fundraising consultants go, "This is great. We'll see if the Zoomies can outbid the Roomies." Make
the Zoomies and the Roomies. That's good.
So Zoomies versus Roomies, and how much money you could collect.
And a lot of it we have to remember is that most people have been doing the events that have been done over the last year. 90% of them are really bad online because everyone's still learning how to do it. Even when I started doing virtual events, probably the first 100 or 200 that I did were pretty rough. But that was 10 years ago. And so as people refine what they're doing, I think that you're going to see that twitch is going to keep moving towards digital events. Go ahead, Nigel. Then we'll move on.
Yeah, there's some ego involved here with the people who run some of these organizations, and
Yep,
they're going to have to
absolutely.
run into a buzzsaw before they change their behavior.
And that's probably what's going to happen. Is the buzzsaw is what, and that's just going to be digital events. I don't have any, I would much rather bring a vendor onto this this show than see them at NAB. I mean, I think that's the fundamental thing that I'm finding is I'd rather spend an hour with them here. I can look at the information online. Otherwise, I don't need to. Generally, I mean, there's a handful of things I need to touch, but for the most part, I just need to know about it. Next question.
Comes from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. And Chris asked, saw a video from DSLR Video Shooter yesterday that had a folding equipment cart. Seemed like a great idea, but the cart seemed lightweight. Anyone have a heavy-duty folding cart recommendation for hauling equipment, an Alex or less preferred?
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so I actually came across this brand myself when I saw another photographer using this stuff to get in some pretty heavy equipment. So I actually like the crane stuff. It's really cool.
Go ahead, Bill.
You should find yourself a MarkerTech catalog or look at the MarkerTech online and just type in carts. You will get 15 or 20 different ones. They generally tend to use pretty good equipment there. And you'll have all sorts of things from your target price all the way up into the $3,000 or $4,000 for real true professional carts.
A little bit more than an Alex, but the one that we've used the most inside of for this type of thing is Cartmaster. Let's start with a K. Cartmaster. They're about $1,000 each, and they are almost indestructible. We literally just check them, and so they fold up into almost nothing, and they are they're not equipment racks that you lay on, but they're like very complex very heavy duty dollies. And we've literally checked them all over the world. And that's how we show up because we're bringing so many cases in. It's just that we started with rock and rollers and learned pretty quickly to move on to something more robust. And those have been the ones that we've been real happy with. Next question.
Attila Arch from Ocean Shores, Australia says, are accelerometers required to make Apple Music spatial audio work in headphones, or is there another reason why third-party headphones are not supported?
Go ahead, Carl.
So yeah, I brought this up before. So Apple's using spatial audio on two marketing terms. One is watching films back on, at the moment, iOS devices and iPads. So if you rotate your head, the sound will still appear to come from that device. That's one use of the word spatial audio, and you switch it on in your AirPod Pro or AirPod Max settings. The other spatial audio is a generic term for what we're essentially surround music. So all surround music, so Atmos can be mixed down to binaural in any headphone. So the better quality headphones you get, but you could use earbuds, $30 earbuds, and you'll get the same effect, but not the same quality that you'd get in the Apple AirPods.
Jason?
The short answer is yes. You need accelerometers to use what Apple's calling spatial audio.
When you're watching films, because of the spatial, but I believe that as Carl said, any headphone will work if you're just listening to the music because it'll get folded down into a binaural experience. And so you can use anything there. So it's just the kind of positional data of being able to rotate and still hear it coming from the screen is the part that you need an accelerometer for. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next. He said, have you ever thought about doing some outreach to middle school or high school media IT teachers about office hours? I could see some real learning and mentoring going on between older professionals and younger students beyond the teach from the textbook model in modern education.
We talk about this every Saturday morning. We're moving it to 9 a.m. instead of 8 a.m. So we're just letting you know. I'll have to send out a correction too. I think that didn't go out in the email, but we're going to move it from 9 to 11 instead of 8 to 10, only because we keep on running into it from the first hour. And so, but that's all we do. We sit around talking about this, and we've got some incredible teachers that show up, and principals and admin and everything else on Saturday. We don't stream that anymore because we're dealing with some nuts and bolts stuff in there that we don't feel like putting on YouTube. So, but 9 o'clock on Saturdays in office hours is a good time to come and check that out. Next question.
Even had some students showed up, some killer people. It's been Douglas Carmichael's up next again, and he says many smaller concert venues, clubs and theaters have house audio and lighting systems which touring acts are mostly expected to use. Do you think this model would help to reduce the cost of larger scale concert production?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I used to work in a venue where we'd had the in-house PA system, and sometimes we would use that in-house PA system. Sometimes they would bring in their in-house PA system, and we'd basically just move ours to the side. So yeah, it would be a good model to reduce time and effort, but there's usually a sound guy with a lot of the higher end productions that has his own choices. And of course, if it does link up with lighting or anything else, they'll use their own system no matter what.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
Many hotels also have people that go with that equipment, because you need those ways that how they've wired things and how they've connected things. And then often you can plug your equipment into their equipment if you have that knowledge.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Depends on how big the band is, like how well known they are. The bigger the band gets, the less likely they are to use the in-house systems, because of just the variation of quality that in-house systems have got. They've got a brand name that they have to protect. They have to do a good performance every time to protect that. So they'll be looking for their own consistency and quality, and they'll bring their own gear and their own people to make sure it happens.
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, we saved a lot of money at the beginning when we realized that bands like to bring their own kit. So we set up a very simple PA in our space, because everyone who came in wanted their own thing. They wanted to know exactly what their own chain was, exactly what would work for them, and what would sound best for them. The only thing that advanced it for us was going online. So it made us have to upgrade everything.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
I think mainly if you're the band or the people going in there, you've got to plug some stuff in and see what it sounds like, because, you can really get stuck with somebody that says, our stuff will work just really fine with you, plug it in, and it really may not be good for the room or something.
Yeah, traditionally, even as someone who wasn't a band, will often come in and want to take over everything. We don't usually want we don't want the local production equipment at all. And now there are definitely places that have really, really great local production, and that works well in some cases. One of the things that we find is that there's some beeping that I'm hearing. I just can't. Are you guys hearing the beeping, or is it just me? Is it somebody? Everyone, close your mics if you're not. I think it might be Tim there. I think you might have some beeping in the background there. So anyway, so we find that little bands are just happy to be there. They don't know which way is up, and they just need you to help them, make it sound good. The big bands know exactly what they want, and they just bring you a stick and say, this is what I want, or they bring their own mixer and they have whatever. The medium bands are the ones that you have it's the small medium bands that have their mixing guy that they grew up with running it, and who has a whole bunch of opinions that don't really work, that then want to inflict it on you as you're trying to put your show together. So those are the ones we always worry about. Go ahead, Tommy.
Yeah, another thing to consider is all these bigger bands will certainly, their mix will have effects that are dialed into certain songs and things that they just need to produce it.
I mean, the conversation that I'm in a lot is the distribution of small venues to other venues. That's happening right now. There's a lot of discussion about that, and in that case, you're probably going to have specialized equipment from the small venue that knows how to do that. And so then it's a matter of rehearsal and more planning, because instead of a band going to where we're going, I believe, based on the conversations that I'm having, is that we're going to go to bands they will go around and tour, but the tours will get much smaller, and they will a lot less cities, and they're going to be able to, in some cases, maybe at the end of the show or at the beginning, most likely at the end of the tour, they'll play somewhere that hits 80 venues at one time, 80 or 100 venues at one time. And that's when they really, they figure out all the bits and pieces on the way, throughout a smaller tour, but they don't do 50 or 100 cities. They do 10, and then they do one that just hits everything. And they've kind of worked out the issues, but we think that that's possibly for a lot of larger bands where they're going. Next question.
Tony Adamopoulos in Missouri says, any recommendations for Mac software for extracting stems from recorded audio, specifically recorded music? It doesn't need to be perfect, which may be impossible.
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so Isotope 8 works on Mac, and it has something called Music Rebalancer. You can actually pull down stems. Now, it's not technically a stem as what was in the mix, but it can pull down the vocals, it can pull down the drums, it can pull down the bass. They're the three easiest ones. And then it can actually pull down everything else, which would probably be guitars and keyboards. You can either remix it, so change the balance within the song, or you can just have one up, just have the vocals up. And a lot of people are doing this to reuse these songs or make karaoke versions, so on and so forth.
That's great. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, and then it can be more or less useful. We used to have a thing where you could remove the vocal from a record only because the vocal tended to be mixed in mono and centered, and the stereo music was on the outside. So there was a difference between the vocal and the music. If you don't have that difference, it can be like mixing paint together and then trying to get the primary colors out. If a flute and an alto singer are in the same exact range, separating those two things can be a bit of a hassle.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, just remember, you cannot unmix audio, period.
A little bit. Next question. You can do pretty good.
Douglas Carmichael, is up next with John's discussion about putting mic elements in masks. Could the same idea be used for mics and respiratory masks for medical use, or would that affect the filtration characteristics of the mask?
It definitely can be done. We've seen it. We've seen a variety of mics used. A lot of times, just boom mics underneath those masks, and then resealed. Those masks are not generally airtight. They're tight, but not airtight for a lot of those things. So you can definitely slide a mic underneath them. Next question.
Lurkus Herzog of Mainz, Germany. If the panel had to plan a new studio space now, what would you outfit it with in terms of lighting and rigging?
A grid. A grid is just life-changing, if you're working on this stuff. Go ahead, Carl.
If money wasn't a question, then the RE orbits. So their orbit lights are pretty cool. If put them on a grid, but the RE orbits, because they're so versatile and what they
we don't have a lot of we're going to move pretty quick through this, but all I'm going to say is that remote control of your lights and grids are the two biggest things. That if you can have those two things in color and intensity and everything else, it really is life-changing. Let's go to the next question. Sorry, we're running out of time.
Okay, Leah Mendel of Pinner, UK. I'm building an open-end use flight case setup for an ATEM Mini Extreme. I'd like to move all the connections to pass-through. I can find USB-C pass-throughs. Will this work for Thunderbolt 3 as it is only a passive connection?
Go ahead, Jason.
No.
Yeah, I don't think that I've ever seen Thunderbolt 3 be able to pass through. So it doesn't, there's no way to do that, right? There's not. Yeah.
Not really, no.
Yeah. I don't think that works. It feels like it should, but I haven't seen a pass through for that. No, next question.
Mason Lancaster in Pasadena, California said, how long have Apple been doing their ads and other releases in spatial audio?
Are they doing their ads in spatial audio? I just don't see ads, so I wouldn't know. Go ahead, Ken.
Well, the first ad they did in spatial audio was when they released spatial audio, which is when they did when they were showing off the spatial audio capability on their headphones.
Yeah. So go ahead, Carl.
As far as television commercials, they've had 5.1 for quite a while.
Yeah, I haven't. I just don't see any ads anymore, so I don't have any idea unless someone points me towards one to look at on YouTube or something like that. I never see them. Next question.
Nigel Dissau in Austin, Texas. What odds do you give the Facebook Watch in impacting the ecosystem?
Facebook Watch has been out for a while. If we're the Facebook Watch, the watch like this, I thought you were talking about the streaming. Little to none. like the chances of, that ship has passed, I think. Here's the deal. They're gonna make millions on it. It will do well. The portal, is doing well and kind of plotting along and doing its thing. And so there's not any reason why it won't be a successful product. Will it make a significant impact on the market? Probably not. I think that as we continue to look at, what makes Facebook money, I think that the people are going to be increasingly more sensitive about like wearing something around that's tracking them is not something that I think a lot of people will be that excited about. Like I have a portal that I use for connections and I unplug it and put it back in its box when I'm done. Like I don't leave it open in my house. And I have a lot of history with that portal. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I see a ton of watches, iOS and Android out there are trying to connect to both of them. And the most recent one I got was from Wise, the ones that make the security cameras. They're trying to get an IoT with doorbells and thermostats and stuff like that. And the watch really hasn't impacted since their crowdfund. So I think Facebook, it'll have a little bit of an audience more than something like Wise, but it'll probably come in and go out really quick.
I do find it interesting that when Apple came into it, people were like, well, it's, when Apple came into the phone area, they were like, oh, yeah, the phone is a well-established product. You're not going to disrupt that. And then when they came into the watch area, they were, well, there's already smartwatches. You're not going to disrupt that. And now it's pretty much, you see someone wearing something other than an Apple Watch, you're like, wow, that's cute. It's like, that's so cute of you, Stuart.
People who like good watches aren't buying any with digital functions. They're buying classic mechanical movement things that they keep forever. They will keep longer than Apple has operating systems.
I know. I said the same thing. I just go, wow, you're being retro. That's how retro of you. Anyway, next, it's like, driving a, Model T. Next question.
Keenan Campbell, Princeton, Illinois. After a crazy week, I can finally check in and say thanks to Office Hours, Man in the Kitchen, World Oceans Day, and Divers Live into classrooms. Thanks to Office Hours for this amazing networking opportunity. John Ittelson can speak to World Oceans Day tech. It was incredible. We probably should have had that up earlier when we were talking about
Yeah, one thing, John, what I'd love to do is when you guys do the next one, if we get enough time to schedule it, what would be really fun is for us to have an Office Hours crew that is streaming the behind the scenes. Like, you don't have to worry about it. Like, it's not something you'll have enough to worry about to do the shoot. But if we can bring in another set of people that are willing to do it.
Keaton and I talked about why it was going on. And he said if we had the bandwidth, we would have turned something on because
I'm saying, like,
it was a lot of fun.
The goal would be to take the bandwidth away from you, where there's just another team that is completely separate.
Oh no, I didn't mean bandwidth of our time, physical bandwidth. We were at the limits of our Wi-Fi.
Oh, but we can still figure out ways to get around.
Yeah, you got to just figure out how to get it, but we'll do it. But I also have to do a shout out to Keaton's wife, who came and cooked. My wife and his wife were on Mad in the Kitchen, and it was pretty magical. They had a lot of fun. So thank you, Keaton, for making the trip.
And our final question for the top of the hour.
Douglas,
for this first hour.
Yeah, in the wake of the global shutdown of concert touring, several touring techs launched Mu SOS, which provides one-to-one music tech support for a small fee to the public. Do you think a similar individualized model could work for promoting the Office Hours brand?
I mean, I think that we're going to do a lot more around concerts. so but I think that I think what we're focused on is really how do we send kits, or how do we send pre-configured kits out to bands to do it. Not so much trying to. The hard part. I mean, I think this is a great program that they took on, but I think that I think that it's hard. Like, what they're doing is hard to give, to work with a system that you're not familiar with, that may or may not be configured in a way that you can manage it is difficult. So it's probably not something I would dive into immediately. Just what I'm looking at is more of a, how do we standardize a kit that we can all use, that we can possibly have one of us go out and manage, for a band. So mine's probably a lot more conservative than what they're doing, I think. So anyway, we're now going to go into the second hour. This is going to be a little complicated, but you can still use the same link. And Nate, if you're or Shannon, if you're on here and you're listening here, just my talent is on. So if you want to tell me, I'm assuming we're going to the link that we had on Monday, the test link. I just want to make sure that someone is talking into talent, not to me directly, but to talent, which I should be able to hear. That's the talent PL. I can see someone talking in Prague. Yeah, hey, I can hear you. So we're using the same link as we did for Monday. Is that correct for the test? Well, Shannon may have to jump in on that. Yeah. So in your email that you came out this morning, so we're testing yet another thing here for the second hour. And so what we're going to do is we're going to throw up a still. Is it a countdown clock, Nate? Yes. So we're going to have a countdown clock here. Okay. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use the link and we'll put it into Mukana. Let's see if someone can post that into Mukana. That's from the, so if you're in Mukana, you'll know where to go. But did someone put the link in for this is the Zoom that we, there we go. So that's the Zoom. This is the test Zoom, not the one that we have that we'll use tonight, but the test Zoom that we had there. So hopefully Andrew put the correct one in there. I don't have it right in front of me. Yeah, so it's good. So what we want people to do is jump in, leave this. We're going to close this up and jump into that. and we'll all be there in a second. And then we're going to start this. We're going to do a different version of what we did here. So let's do that right now. All right, go ahead and I'm going to, Taylor, go ahead and give me back the host.
Okay. Oh.
She
are other people seeing
Yeah,
it?
Mukana confirms that there's nothing.
There's no audio going out to YouTube.
No audio going out to YouTube.
Okay, well, that's why we're testing. So we're sitting here. And we're testing. So somehow the audio is not going out. Let us know if you start to hear it, and we'll see how that goes. So as we work through this new structure, and so everyone's gets to watch us figure all this stuff out, and we're just trying to figure out. I'm going to ping, yeah. Do we know why we're not?
Audio's just started to come up now.
Okay. And Nate, do we know what happened there? What happened with the audio? Do we know what happened with the audio? So somehow the audio is not going out. Let us know if you start to hear it, and we'll see how that goes. So you should be able to hear us now. And what we're doing is we're basically we had a little audio issue there as we do a throw it. And so we didn't have audio going out there, so for a minute, but we now have it working. And one of the things what we're waiting for also is to see if we can get a return feedback into our into what we're doing here. So hopefully we'll be able to sort that out. Go ahead, Carl.
Whoever's in charge of the screen script that's going out to YouTube, can they put Alex Lindsay in the top left corner?
I think it'll be hard to change that, but we shouldn't see the screen scrape very often. So, it'll only, the goal is for us to not see it very often, and for it to only be like, okay, we're going to go over everybody there, grab somebody or someone starts to talk, then go back into a full, then go back into the super sources. And so it shouldn't matter too much where I'm at. They can look at rearranging that as well, though. It's a little harder in the Zoom rooms to rearrange that. It's not quite as, I'm not sure how that our dexterity in that area is not incredible. So anyway, so we're gonna kind of play with this here, and hopefully we'll figure out what happened with our audio and source it out there. Let's jump in. We've got a couple questions coming in, so let's go ahead, Bill, and let's manage some of those questions there.
Right. Let me get over here, and it looks like I'm trying to figure out which ones are from. Here's the first rebuild one I see, and it says.
Yeah. So for the folks on the back end, this is another thing we're testing. We've got multiple people in the operator room. Stop. Stop doing what you're doing. You're creating confusion for both Bill and I. Everyone's hitting too many things at one time. You can't. The only thing that anybody else in the operator page should touch is lower third. Do not move a question. Do not touch a question. The only thing that you can do is touch lower third if you're in the back end, because otherwise you're moving things around and you're deleting things, and it's causing. This is why we don't let people use the operator page. So I don't know who we have set up in the operator page. There's only one button to hit, and that's lower third. There's no other button. Don't rearrange anything, and don't touch anything else. All right. So we might have lost a question in there, but in that process. But yeah, go ahead, Stuart, before we jump into the question.
Yeah, we've got the audio repeating back through somebody's speakers or microphone as well, so I can hear that. That's only in Zoom. That's not listening to the YouTube at all.
So someone's feeding it back into Zoom.
It's gone now.
Yeah, it's probably someone had an open mic in Zoom. So it's kind of a watch party thing. Again, the other thing for us to understand is how to watch these. And one of the things, you can't have open speakers. So the best way to do this is to have Zoom opened and then have YouTube opened in the same computer with headphones on. That is the best way to do this. And then you can control how high and how low the YouTube is. But if you have open speakers while you're trying to do this, it'll be much harder. Let's go ahead and go ahead. What's the question, Bill?
The first one that's tagged rebuild, and I'm just going to note that these tags have really become incredibly powerful and useful now, so make sure you tag your questions. It comes from Jonas Dautel of Reutlingen, Germany, and he said, will there be a Discord role for the OGs, maybe a leveling system with time, since joined a message sent would make sense? Time since joined on a message sent would make sense.
I don't quite follow that question. So I'm not. You'll have to I can't. I don't know what that means. Let's go to the next question.
Okay, we're going to slip up to A. Mitchells, our friend from Washington. So for basic real-time audience engagement, and for those on mobile devices that can't access this content as it is currently structured, would it make sense to use the 090M05 machine to send the feed from the switcher back to the Zoom main room? Seems like a simple simple and easy common sense solution. Thanks.
Yeah, the problem is it creates chaos inside of the room. And we can't, here's the thing is that overall what we want was we don't want the audio coming back into the room. You know, we want people to be able to talk in the room while they're watching something externally. Right now it's odd because we're in Zoom, feeding it back into Zoom. But the end result of what we're trying to figure out is how to have that experience, because you're going to have experiences that are you're watching a sports game, or you're watching a movie together, or you're watching other things together, and it's always going to be external. From a copyright perspective, we can't plug it back in. So we're going to have to figure this out. Both the users have to figure out how to watch it, and we have to figure out how to set that up for people. But that solution will not be feeding it back into the room. So, you know, because that creates a loop that we're trying to figure out how to avoid because of copyright issues primarily. Go ahead, Taylor.
Alex, I like this setup a little better because I feel like we can interact with each other as people on the show in more real time versus the audio chain that was set up previously where, you know, we were all in our own little room staring at a screen of the switcher, and then there was a not too bad, but a slight delay on audio, you know, coming to us and going out. Yeah, with us being all in the same room like this makes it work beautifully.
It does. I mean, the thing that we're right now challenged with is that we don't have isolated audio. So there's two pieces of that don't work as well. Now, what we're looking at is for a panel like ours, when we're dealing with regular people, we're trying not to do that so that we can talk back to them. For our panel, what we're probably going to end up doing is giving you all Unity clients. This is the way that Tucker and other folks do it, where the panel, if you're chosen for the panel, you'll have a Unity client input. So then we do have that talk back. We can talk to you about, you know, talk back to you and talk to the group and everything else as you move forward. So just having that talk back is the key to the operation. We may also be able to do things like use Unity Connect or even Unity Comms to pass our audio back. So there's some more complex ways that we could do this, but I think that within the next 3 months, most likely we'll just figure out a way to carve it out of the Zoom. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the confusing thing is if we're having to monitor the audio from YouTube and we start talking in the peanut gallery here, then we're going to hear a delay.
If you're in this conversation, you should only be in this conversation. Like that's the goal is that you're only.
I have YouTube muted right now, which is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. If you're in the panel that's going to be going out to YouTube, you shouldn't. It'll be very confusing if you leave YouTube open. So it's really for
the peanut gallery, and the other's the panel. Okay.
The other panel is watching that and then interacting with us via Mukana, as opposed to and all synced up. And as we begin, I mean, there's a point where, you know, it's not sustainable to do what we've been doing, and so that we have to figure out a way that basically the viewing audience will be watching a stream as opposed to, and there's a bunch of advantages to that down the road already. I mean, we're going to get to a point where the quality of the video and audio and everything else that's being seen by the folks in the stream is much higher than anything that people were going to see in Zoom. Go ahead, Bill, and then Taylor.
Well, I'm just interested in how we're going to handle. I played with Unity Comms a little bit, but during the show, obviously, I can't pay attention to it because I need to stay focused on the show. So I'm working on a little mini Behringer mixer to be able to loop back the comms channel at a very lower level so that I don't get too confused. I can still monitor what people might be saying to me on the back channel.
Hopefully, we're not going to talk to you very much. It's mostly just giving someone notes.
Just an occasional, I expect that. And so I think
mine's just mucks together. So my output, just both of them goes to my Scorpio, and then they just come to me together, and then I have to decide what volume each one is at. But that's it. Go ahead, Taylor.
I think I'm going to do comms on my phone and just run it back into a little Behringer mixer into my earpiece, and that should take care of it.
I think that's a horrible idea, but you can try it. You can try it. I've done it.
Happy to listen to it.
You got to figure out a way to mux both signals from the computer. It'll make it much easier. And I've done the phone thing many times, and it's just it doesn't work. Go ahead, Taylor.
I'll take your advice. Thanks.
Yeah. So, Alex, I'm just trying to picture this in my head. So, if I had to guess, the video right now is we're all together. And this meeting is in many rooms, and then we're each pinned up in each room.
In this case, though,
into a video switcher?
Well, in this case, it's just us here, and then each person is pinned. You know, each person that's showing up in it is pinned in a room.
Gotcha.
So these rooms that are down below, those are the pinning rooms. And if you're watching on YouTube, you won't see those because we're set to hide non-video. So there's these hidden rooms that are in here, and those are pinning to individuals. And so one of them is grabbing the grid, all of us here. And then other ones are there's a handful of people that we asked before the show, like, do you want to be a regular on this? And so we set those folks up with lower thirds and so on and so forth. Then there's one that's kind of a wild card that we can pin anybody to. So Nate can just grab onto one person at a time as needed to put into the super source. Go ahead, Jason.
So could the solution be pinning audio, having another pin just specifically to isolate audio, or is
right
that
now we just can't? You just can't. If we're in this Zoom together, our audio is all. We have maximum of 3 channels being delivered, and so we can't get everybody's individual audio right now. There's a bunch of things that we're trying to figure out. I mean, it would literally revolutionize what we do if we could. If we were able to isolate audio inside of Zoom, it would kind of change the world. So almost an incredible number of the things that we're doing right now that are somersaults to solve this are just because Zoom won't give us the direct links to the audio. And so that's a critical problem for us at the moment, which we take advantage of. We use with the hardware. The thing we found with the hardware is that it just adds latency to it. And so one of the things we want to try to do is put you can put a Zoom server on in the building. So we'd like to see if there's some way to kind of solve that problem there as well. Next question.
Moving on, the next one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, I know that one reason why some engineers use analog consoles and outboard is that they can maintain it more easily with knowledge of electronics. What resources would you recommend to learn about electronics principles and electronics maintenance skills?
Go ahead, Carl.
So I own a copy of the Handbook for Sound Engineers. It's like 1,000 pages. It's currently sitting on top of my amp. It has got circuitry for compressors, for limiters. So this is very deep. So every chapter in this book is deep. This is the 5th edition since 1987. There's probably about 50 authors total in this book. So this is, if you want to go deep and you want to understand how the circuitry works, then this is the book to go for.
Go ahead, Taylor.
Yeah, Carl, I agree with you on that. When I wired up my low power FM station, I reference that manual heavily because we use all analog boards and stuff. So I had to understand the circuitry and the wiring.
Next question.
To Alex Ittelson, looks like, from Seattle, says, you mentioned that there is a new API to stream to XDR Mini LED iPad. Could you point me to a WWDC session name or Apple kit name where it's mentioned?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I don't have the name, but I can tell you that there is actually an earlier one that has been implemented from 2020 WWDC where they first integrated the XDR component. I would start there.
Go ahead, Bill.
And if you get the developer app, which is open to anybody, you can index all the WWDC by topic. There's a variety of indexing methods, so you can probably locate an issue or a session that helps you there.
Next question.
Cami Weinsweg of Redondo Beach says, can Makana support other languages, mostly mean right to left and others with different alphabets?
It can. It doesn't right now. We have done it in other shows. Not changing the direction, but definitely supporting the characters and so on and so forth for other languages. We just haven't done it here. So it's definitely something that's on the what we're trying to figure out down the road. Of course, is the ability to translate, in real time. So that if you say I'm in English, questions show up as a button to push that will flip it to English, or vice versa to whatever other language that you want to go to there. Go ahead, Jason, and then Taylor.
To answer the previous question, what's new in HTTP live streaming is this year's version, and that's part of the AV Foundation series.
Yeah, go ahead, Taylor.
I just want to note on the larger questions, they cover up when you're on the full panel shot, they cover up the bottom 3 people. The questions do.
Yeah, we have to figure that out too. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
A. Mitchells is diving deep into copyright here. How is it a copyright conflict when using one of the 090 machines to feed the switcher's output back into the viewer's Zoom in addition to the YouTube at the same time? Wouldn't all the rights issues be covered by the fact that the host producing the content is sending their own content to Zoom? So they own the content, they own the Zoom, and they own the YouTube channel.
So for this show, there's no conflict. The problem is that we're not going to be doing this show all the time. So we use office hours to figure out how to do it, and we think about the larger scope of what we may want to do. So for instance, streaming the Apple keynote or the Blackmagic keynote or something back into our Zoom is a violation of their copyright. It is a violation of the terms of service. You know, putting an NFL game or a hockey game or a soccer game into Zoom and then streaming it back out to YouTube or whatever else we want to do is a violation of copyright. So what we're trying to do is not build something that we can use. Very rarely are we doing something that is just for us. The goal is we're trying to think about how do we scale this into the public, and the way we scale the second ear experience. There's a whole bunch of reasons not to do it. One is that it makes it very hard to have just an open discussion. People can listen to it. What we need is users that over time, and we have to figure it out, like we would give instructions for people on how to do this, you know? And so for instance, you might be watching on a TV, listening to it. So for instance, right now we have people talking, but what happens if you just want to listen to the second ear experience, all of us discussing it, watch the Apple TV, watch the Apple event on your Apple TV with an app, with a surround sound experience or whatever. You're not ever planning to talk, which is 90% of the people that are in Zoom, right? With our events, you're not ever planning to talk. You just want to listen to that extra data. What you don't want is that extra the audio to come back into your ear, you know, while you're doing it. So when you think about it as a Zoom only experience, that's one thing. But when you think about being able to watch something else, and that doesn't even have to be something that you're watching a show. Imagine having a second ear experience at a baseball game or at a football game where we can't pipe that back in. And so that's what you want to, that's what we want to avoid, you know? And so what we're trying to do is build a pipeline, and part of it is we're just figuring it out. But I can promise you that we're never going to pipe it back into the Zoom thing, because then it's both a copyright issue as well as and Stephen, you got to close your mic. I can't close it from here. I don't have a mute. This is the problem, by the way, with the muxed audio. This is why we need separate audio, is because we don't have the power to pot something down. Anyway, so so functionally, it makes sense for you to hear it separately. Remember, most of the people in office hours are not talking. And so we want them to, you know, so then it's not a problem. They're theoretically watching a show and listening to commentary, and what's important is that they're all synced up in time. What's not important is for them to have it piped back in as that singular experience. Go ahead, Courtney.
Sorry, my Zoom was not unclicking. That it sounds like that would work fine for all live events where everybody can join the original live stream on their own, and everyone will stay in sync with semi-sync with whatever the live stream is. But if you're originating the material that people are going to comment on, and it's copyrighted material, and you don't want to feed it back into a public channel, then it's going to become a problem, because starting and stopping it, you know, the individual people can't play it back independently and keep everything in sync. So I'm not sure how that's going to work.
You actually, well, you can. so you know, you can control the playhead. I mean, Netflix Party does that right now. It's got its own the problem with Netflix Party is that it listens to everyone, rather than what it needs is a central control that is broadcasting up as, you know, a playhead position. And they had this idea that everyone's going to want to hit stop and start and everything else. And what it does is it causes it's so chatty that it comes apart at about 100 people. Whereas if you had a broadcast and listeners, you could do it with thousands or tens of thousands of people, where you could control that playhead as needed. But you know, but even if you're just watching the movie and you're never hitting the playhead, you're just, like, for instance, this opens up the opportunity, especially when you look at the kind of the Apple's implementation isn't right yet, but eventually you're going to get to a point where we could queue up and all watch something on Apple TV or on Disney Plus or whatever, and we could have a handful of people commentating, and a whole lot of people listening and asking questions on Mukana, and that'd be a really rich experience, I think. And without any stopping or starting, just that we just need to know that they're all starting at the same time. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I've missed the first couple of days of this, but I figured this is at very least worth bringing up. Is there any advantage to bringing the non-participatory people in Zoom down into a Zoom room and flipping the bit, so to speak, such that the presenters, the people who are actually speaking, are in the main room as opposed to the Zoom room?
There's so many of them, so we'd have to move them all. So you move the panelists out because there's just less of them, you know, and so if we have 150 people, we'd have to move 150 people rather than just moving 12. So that's why we're moving it in, and it's usually easier to control that. It's also just easier to control access. If we put it in the main room, that means people could be continuing to come in while we're talking. So by pulling them into a separate one, we're able to, you know, have controlled access for it. And again, you know, this is all early days. We're all still trying to experiment and figure out which way is up, you know, with this. And that's why we're doing these tests. But we're going to go more towards this model than the older model, at least for tonight, and then we'll see where we go from there. A lot of this will get shifted dramatically as we, you know, start using more Zoom ISO and Zoom OSC to let us kind of work through that. Go ahead, Taylor.
What's the advantage of this setup versus the setup I experienced on Monday? I mean, the setup on Monday, I could see an obvious audio advantage there. But what's the advantage by this setup, or is this just strictly experimental?
Well, so there's a couple things. One is we don't need a computer for every single person. So we have a computer for the main people that's pinning each person. But there's also but we can have kind of a random access to another 6 or 8 or 10 people that we'd have, where we can grab onto them and just pin as needed. So that allows us to. That's what we couldn't do on Monday night, was add a lot more people. And so what we ended up with was a great show. I think a really, really great discussion about what was happening, but not as much, didn't feel as much like an office hours, you know, and so we kind of went back to the drawing board, and, you know, and we were going to go this direction the week before. We just didn't quite get all the things nailed down. So the advantage of this is number one is that we can incorporate more people into the conversation, which is what we're used to. The disadvantage and the other advantages is that the latency is lower. You can notice that it just doesn't feel as, you know, I'm not waiting for that extra quarter second. You know, and a quarter second for me feels like an eternity, you know, like, and so I think
that audio to catch up.
Yeah, for us there's just a little bit of a space between each one of us. If you're editing, it's great because there's these little black spaces all the time. But otherwise, it's a little harder to have I think the conversation in this room is more fluid than otherwise. Go ahead, Tommy.
Yeah, what are some of the constraints that you need to employ in this?
What do you mean by constraints? Well, we need people who understand. We need people to understand how to turn their mics on and off, and how to, you know. So the constraints are mostly that number one is that with that we have to send you. If we want to have talkback with you, we'll have to send you Unity, you know, to do that, which is possible. Another constraint is that all of our audio is, you know, Stephen had a couple coughs there that are mixed into the audio. There's no way for us to mix it back, you know. So it's a great example for us to use for this test, but. So there's no way to pull that back. And then it's a little, what's nice about the other way to do it is that you kind of put people in their own room, and it means that we have a lot of control, and we can talk to them, and we can, you know, do a lot of other things that are a little easier. We've also found that if anyone hears spotlights, it breaks our pins. So it's really important that nobody in the thing spotlights anything. So that's another issue that we have. Go ahead, Courtney.
So that I just understand how you guys are setting it up on that end, I noticed that everybody that's in this 13-person room, 6 of those people are in the panel room that's showing up on YouTube, which we don't really see here in this room. Are they in a separate, showing up in a separate computer? They're signed in twice to Zoom?
Well, they're signed in. We're all here together. All we're doing is we have another computer dedicated to. There's like 5 of us that the computer is dedicated to a pin. It's just pinning. It's just pinned on them and hanging on them.
So
One
it's the
person.
same room, just an independent pin on each of those 6 Mac Minis or whatever you're using for independence. Right?
Some Dells that are there. That each person is pinned. The people that are kind of perma-pinned, which are, you know, the primary guests are pinned and left that way so that we can always cut to them. And then there's one computer that we can actively pin or leave on active speaker to bounce around so that we can incorporate somebody that's not one of those into the conversation.
Remainder of the room then can come into the independent pin,
Yeah. And Courtney, you're for instance, you're being pinned that way right now in that area. Go ahead, Jason, and then Taylor.
So just so I understand this, to bring this home for this evening, for example, the whole thing will be completely transparent to us, right? We won't have any sort of fold back or unity, at least this evening. And the way that it would work is, if we're chosen for the panel, there will be people who are permapinned. Andy will be permapinned, you know, and basically we'll raise our hands in the same way, and you just call on us.
That's right. And it's, we do have to figure out, I'm not sure, we discussed having a return and we don't have the return coming back to us right now. So we have to figure that out just so we know what's there. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe we just have a conversation and we don't see the return. I like to see the return. But we might be able to get away without it tonight if there's some technical reason why we're not getting it back. But there was some, so we're trying to figure that out. Anyway, so that was an intended request that didn't happen. Go ahead, Taylor.
I know you and Andy and Akko like to get back and forth in conversation, and I think the way you have it set up now for interaction purposes and that less delay will be very helpful for you tonight.
Yeah.
Because that way when you're going back and forth on something, you're saying something, he's saying something, you're saying something, that'll be a lot easier. Because I think when you're on the TWiT network, you have a similar experience like we had on Monday, where it's that slow. So people who are newer guests on the program aren't sure when to chime in at first until you've been on a couple of times. By doing it this way, it's real obvious when you can chime in and when the other person is done speaking.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ari, and then or Ari, and then Richard.
Thank you. Actually, I was just working on this today. I had a small grid number of people in a room, and I returned the program into that room. And the question is, if we had a program return here and we pinned it on our local machine, would that disrupt anything on the back end? Because it's a local function. So whereas can we toggle between pinning the feed and seeing the grid, or would that?
You should be able to pin it. I think it's just spotlighting that causes trouble on our end.
Yeah, spotlighting definitely causes a problem. But if we had the program feed in here, we could basically self-select to see the program feed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it's mostly like I don't even need to see it full. Like I can just look at all of you talking through here. The hard part I need is just to know what is happening with the program. And so right now we're not seeing that. And it may be that there's the hide self view is the problem that we have that we're not seeing. I'll find out afterwards. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, in this version, say a guest has or a panelist has a problem, and obviously because the audio is all mixed in, what's the emergency get out? Is it just leaving the room?
Yeah.
Is there a way of kind of warning the team before that happens? So because chat's disabled as well.
Yeah, there's not any good way to do that, and so that's the disadvantage of what we're doing here. Where before we could just pot it down and have a conversation with the person in pre-fade and just do what we need to do. And that's not possible with what we're doing here. Go ahead, Carl.
So if I can understand this correctly, are we able to bring in like a multi-view, like the 10-up multi-view we had on Monday, into this room with no audio?
We should be able to. I'm not sure exactly why we're not getting it.
Because as you said on Tuesday, I believe, it gives a panelist, a full-time panelist, to know when to have a break, when to scratch, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I don't know if Nate, you can talk into my ear if you can tell me, but I don't know why we're not getting a return into this room. Go ahead, Taylor.
I was also going to say, just for experimental sake, I went and clicked on your picture, Alex, and tried to spotlight you, and I don't have that option, so that's good news. If I hit pin right now, I have you pinned right now, and it doesn't look like it's messed up everything. So,
and for the guys that are watching on the other side, I mean, go ahead and try to get something like work out a solution. This is what we're trying to work out before tonight. So we want to see the program in one of these returns right now. Okay, yeah. So go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so if we bring multi-view, as Taylor just said, you can pin and we're not affecting the show. So if we can bring the 10-up multi-view we used on Monday into this room, I can pin the 10-up, and that way it's exactly the same experience I had on Monday.
Right. The tricky part that we're having with this is that if we send you the return, it means when we cut to this panel, we see that return. And so what we're trying to make sure is that return gets hidden when we cut to the panel window. That's the tricky part. It's not putting it back in is not the tricky part. It's putting it back into this and then not having it seen in the broadcast when we cut to it is the part that we're still working on. Go ahead, Carl.
So as we've got like a odd number here, so in the scale you can actually just key that out. You can't key that out like that odd person down the bottom when you cut to this larger panel. So because you've got like 13 in here at the moment.
But if we had 12 and then 13 and then just clip it out, that might be another way to do that.
So the 13th you can mask it out.
It's just that if it changes order, you know, and again, in a Zoom room, this is harder. Like, so in a Zoom meeting, moving people around is easy. In a Zoom room, I don't even know how to do that. Like, it's not built for that. And so it's a little bit more complicated. There's no mousing into a Zoom room. That's the problem. Go ahead, Richard.
Again, kind of with this new format, is it worth now using Ray's digital hand rather than using Ray's actual hand, or is it kind of like it's an office hours motif in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're still going to have people raise their hands just because I need to know where to go. We're working on a solution to bypass that in the back end. It's just not done yet. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
I went to the gallery view and I'm able to move on my screen people around. So couldn't the switcher take a gallery view, range it?
It's a Zoom room. It's a Zoom room, and a Zoom room works differently than your interface. And so it's not, we don't have the same access. The Zoom room is not designed for you to interact with it. It's designed to turn it on, and you put grid over here and you put this over here, and the goal is not to have you mousing over things. And so the rearrangement.
The Zoom room is what your switcher constellation is using.
All these are Zoom Room 7, Zoom Room 6, Zoom Room, go ahead, John.
How many of the you've got the main panel or prime panel, and we're the secondary panel. How many of us can be switched into there, and how long does it take to do that?
Well, any one of you can be switched in immediately.
Only one though.
At a time, yeah. One can be switched in at a time, and we could have less prime people and more, other people. But right now, the way we have it set up is that we've got, we're planning to have, I think, 5 primary pins, and then one or two that or maybe 6 primary pins. I have to look at it. But anyway, the point is that right now we're set up to go to the room, and in most cases that'll work because you only need one person's talking at a time. So the only place that would be difficult would be if Stuart's talking to you and we're trying to go to a 2-up, that would be harder. So that, this is all prior to having the Zoom OSC and Zoom ISO stuff sorted out, because all of that goes away at that point, because then everybody, we have, random access to every single person and being able to put them all up and being able to organize them and even move them in audio and all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of things that we can do once we tie all those pieces together. We're just not quite there yet. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Well, and for risk of stating the obvious, of course, none of us can do this return in Switcher. None of us can do something like this because, of course, the purpose of the return is to get in front of the delay, or I'm sorry, behind the delay, right? So, somebody on your side has to do it. It's not like one of us can do it.
No, yeah. So we're just waiting to see. Yeah, but what you're grabbing there is the program from YouTube, which is 20 seconds behind, rather than that doesn't help us.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I could have grabbed the other one too, but yeah, you get the idea.
Yeah, but there is no return right now, to that, and that's what we're working on. Do we have any questions in Mukana?
Yeah, actually, a few have come in. Stuart Fairweather has the next one. He says, "How are things going with the overlay for presenters self-positioning?"
I think most of us are centered, and Nate can probably tell me. I can't see. I mean, I'm not watching the YouTube because it's behind. So, I think I would probably hear it if it wasn't working. so I think that for the most part, it is more important for our guests to be centered than it is normally. Centered and probably with a little more shoulder, like Taylor is probably a little too close and to the side to make that work. Yeah, so you need more shoulder. It needs to be better framed than we have in the past. Go ahead, Taylor, and then Jesse.
Bill's hitting his head on the top of the box when the panel's up. Go ahead, Jesse, and then Jason. Relatively quickly, we have to end a little early because we have to prep for something else. So,
I was just going to say Jason is a little small; needs to be enlarged.
Right. Go ahead, Jason.
I, for one, will be getting a haircut, so I get to turn that zoom up just a little bit before this evening.
Yeah. Next question.
Comes from Stuart Fairweather, and he says, is there a moderator in the main room keeping the etiquette standards?
I don't know. People have to tell us if there is one there, but we'll have one tonight, definitely. We'll have some folks that are ready to, keep everybody in line. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, if there were a Zoom Rooms client that could output multiple NDI and or Dante feeds, would that negate the need for multiple 090 machines?
Potentially, but it would depend on how many. And again, there are times when we really want to use the other version of this, which is that, like, for instance, for presenters, and there's a whole bunch of other reasons and more complicated ones with people that we can't give all Zoom to. There's a bunch of things that'll take time before we would separate that out. So this is still what I would consider an experimental format. Next question.
Michael Vosbein, Woodstock, Georgia, a bit off topic, but I appreciate and agree with the panel's insights as to the future of the music industry with regard to recording and touring, but freelance musicians generally make a living locally playing concerts, clubs, events, and teaching private lessons. What changes do you see for that?
Having a global audience. That's what I think. It makes more of a difference for the small bands than the big ones. I mean, building up a following. If you go to Patreon, you'll see bands who have figured this out. Not all of them have, and they're not all making money. But there's the one that always stands out for me are the three girls in Mexico City who did Enter the Sandman, 10 years ago or 6 years ago or something like that. They are now making more than most of us here. I can't get into the numbers, but they're making more than most of us here, and they're still doing it in their basement, and now they're doing concerts and they're doing other things like that. And they're writing their own music, and they've got a huge following in there, and those, as a subscription base, it's very stable. So the folks who are figuring that out are, it's a much bigger market, much bigger pool for them to pull from. Next question.
Moving on, A. Mitchell's, Washington. Whoops, that slipped off the screen. While there are certainly events that could have copyright issues that would prevent them from being streamed live into a Zoom, these questions are specifically about the office hours only events where the content is being created by 090. So why not send it to the Zoom? There doesn't seem to be a copyright issue.
Because structurally, we don't want people to have to listen to it that way. We don't want to mux those two signals together. We want people to be able to listen to it separately. So we want people to decide what volume they want one and what versus the other. And so by pushing it into the Zoom, we would take that away from them. So people will have to figure that out. But we're not going to do that. I promise you. Next question.
Comes from Douglas Carmichael. When I went to an IMAX theater, they played a short demonstration film before the main feature that had been rendered at a major supercomputing center. Could you easily feed a live video stream from a large system, NDI 2110 perhaps, if the software could handle it?
Yes. That's all I can say there. Next question.
Comes from our friend Tolak Miguel Lopez Waterman, and he says, did I just hear that hide self view does not work on a Zoom room?
I'm not clear why it's not working. so we'll continue to work on it. I have to DX this after the show. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, I know that large sports events, as well as some air shows, for example, they have flight demonstrations synchronized to the music. How is that done? Are you feeding a click track into the pilot's helmet?
Go ahead, Jason.
Usually it's with time code. It's that simple. They have time code in the displays. I've shot several of these, and that's generally how it works.
Next question.
Marcus Lee Fook in Trinidad, Caribbean. You could try sending the program feed via the Zoom room with a grid view and then hide self, maybe?
Yeah, that was the theory. So I'm not sure exactly why that's not possible right now. Even if it broke, we'd like to see it, but evidently I don't know how. I guess none of these machines are getting a return or something that we can't just turn them on to see what happens. But yeah. Anyway, next question. I'm gonna answer Stuart's real quickly because we're gonna cut off here a little early, and we'll. Stuart, it's tonight, 4:30 Pacific Standard Time is when we're going to open the doors, and then 6 o'clock, exactly the same we did on Monday. So hopefully people will be able to do that. And then let's just answer Roberto's as well. I usually listen to office hours in Zoom on my phone while I work, but I can't seem to do both while you break out with the panel. How do I watch YouTube on Mukana on my phone? Yeah, that's a limitation. I mean, the phone version is designed actually for you to watch something else and then watch it on something else. and then interact with the content. That's why it doesn't have a video, is specifically so that you can do it the way we're talking about it there. Go ahead, Jason.
No, you're absolutely right. Forget what I was about to say.
Yeah, and then okay, A. Mitchell's has the last. We'll have the last. Go ahead.
Okay, you want me to do this big one, or do you want to go through? It was also clear, based on what was seen in the Makana chat during the event Monday night, that the experience for most mobile device users was at best not pleasant and at other times completely unusable. So what are we testing now that fixes this problem? And he notes, how do we bridge this large gap for those on mobile devices where there's a clear technology limit that restricts access to the event as structured?
We're going to keep on figuring it out. There's, we need to have apps, that do that. A dedicated app is what we need. There's only so much we can do with a web page. So we're working on some solutions, but the only way for us to figure out what those solutions are is to decide which way we're going to go and then just keep nugging down that path. So now we definitely have a return. We have lots of returns.
Yeah,
now.
Lots of returns. That's
lots.
Cool.
There's lots of bills.
Yeah, exactly. So we got that part working. Anyway, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, I just want to restate the proverb: "Be waiting for a bus and foreshop at once."
Sorry, say that again.
When you're waiting for a bus forever and then foreshop at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. We've got. Let's see here. We just answered that one. Go ahead. We'll go real quick, and then we're going to shut off.
Art Bly Jr., Cupertino, real quick. Did a few things change? I was not able to join the webinars. It says it's waiting to be started.
Yeah, Art, you missed the note, but we all moved to a meeting, so you just had to be here at the right time. You missed that there. Anyway, next question.
Douglas Carmichael, what would you think of a second-hour deep dive of programming, lighting, visual cues to timecode with a copyright-safe track?
Yeah, we'd love that. Let's just put it in the second hour. Next question.
And the last one that we've got here is Carmi Vineswig says, how about just an audio feed to Makana in the mobile version?
Yeah, we can do that. I just have to figure out why we're. You could turn that on, and then you'd be able to listen to it. You'd be able to listen to that conversation. And I thought we were doing that today, but because we've done all this rearrangement, I think that maybe Mickey doesn't have access to that. So we'll figure out how to tie that back in. We have to close a little early today due to the testing and everything else. So we're going to close this up. But I want to thank you all for putting up with our crazy experiment. We're figuring it out. We're way out in the jungle with a machete. There's no road where we are. So you'll see us continue to kind of fiddle with this for the next couple days. We may just go back to regular ones next week. I'm actually going to miss a couple. I'm going to try to see if Bill wants to host a couple of them. I have a couple conflicts. But we're going to kind of keep on rethinking this and probably experimenting with it at least once a week over the summer. So one day, most likely Mondays, will just be us fiddling, with this process, and then we'll go into figuring out the bits and pieces there. Go ahead, Stuart.
Even our car crash experiments look better than old world media right now.
Yeah. and again, I think that what I'll say is that it's going to get a lot better. Like the old, like we're in this kind of, there's this gestation of us trying to kind of figure all of this stuff out. But we know where we're going with this. I can see it now. And it took all this technology. It took what we're doing, what I've been doing for the last 10 years. It took seeing what Liminal was doing, seeing, how we put the fact that we have all these incredible panelists that are, upping their game and making it possible. And so there's all these bits and pieces that we've been pulling together that are all now, we're going to spend this summer like fusing into a unit that I think is going to be pretty revolutionary. I don't think anyone will have ever seen anything like what we have by September, but there'll be lots of growing pains in between. And when in doubt, we'll go back to a grid, and just kind of do what we did. Like we'll just keep on going back to that safe space every once in a while, but with a lot of your help. And again, you'll notice that there's a link to fill out a form that says you want to play. Over the summer, there'll be opportunities for you to be part of these teams as we kind of figure this stuff out. So if you're adventurous, you doesn't have to be a ton, and you don't have to be really technical. We also need people that are going to help us manage like who's showing up on Tuesdays so that we can focus. So I can focus on how we do this rather than who we do it with. So anyway, so we're going to be working on that as well. So if you have all kinds of skills that you think you can add to it, let us know in that form, and we'll get back to you. We'll start getting back to people by the end of next week. Taylor?
Real quick, answering the last question in regards to audio and Mukana, JJ, Mickey, and I are probably going to get together on Saturday and get that sorted out.
Great. Sounds great. All right. Okay, everybody. Thanks so much. We're going to close it up. Go ahead and thank you so much for watching. And Nate, go ahead and take us out of this.
Tenda.